Almost 6 years after the announcement of the Lumix DC G9, Panasonic has announced its successor, the Lumix DC G9 II. This is the company's high-end model aimed at stills shooters, and it is the first-ever Lumix Micro Four Thirds camera to include phase detection autofocus. Despite its target demographic, the G9 II comes with a surprisingly long list of video features as well. A thorough redesign. The G9 II is based off the chassis of the full-frame Lumix S5 II and S5 IBIS, giving it room for plentiful controls and ports. Key specifications: 25 MP CMOS sensor with dual output gain, 5-axis in-body image stabilization, separated to 8 stops. On-sensor phase detection, 779 points. 3. 1.84 m. Fully articulating touchscreen. 3.86 m. OLED electronic viewfinder with 0.8x magnification. 60 frames per second burst shooting with AFC and electronic shutter, 10 frames per second mechanical. 100 MP handheld high-res mode. Up to 5.8K open gate 4.20 C4K 4.2 to 10-bit with Vlog. ProRes 422 and 422 HQ recording to SSD. Full-size HDMI. 390 shots per charge battery life using LCD. USB-C power delivery. External SSD support. Dual UHS to card slot. Wi-Fi plus Bluetooth. The Panasonic will be available from early November with a recommended price of $1,899 body only. This is a $200 price increase from the launch price of its predecessor, the G9. What's new? Rather than a refresh of the original DSLR-like Lumix G9 concept, the G9 II goes in a more modern direction. Not only does it take technological advancements from the full-frame Lumix S lineup, it has the same external design as the S5 II announced earlier in the year. It's taller, more squared off, and has more controls than its predecessor. It isn't just a similar design, it's literally the same outer shell, but without fan vents and with a different lens mount and sensor inside. Hybrid autofocus and DR boost improvements. The G9 II is based around a sensor related to the one in the GH6, but that Panasonic says has been revised at both the hardware and software levels. The most obvious difference is that the version in the G9 II has phase detection elements that make it the first Micro Four Thirds Lumix model to offer inherently depth-aware autofocus. The other change that will make a big difference is the way the dual output gain system works. Panasonic describes it as having to read out paths that are subjected to differing levels of gain, which are then combined. This way, you get the highlight capture benefits of low gain and the cleaner shadow performance of high gain paths, combined as a 16-bit RAW file to ensure room to encode this widened dynamic range. For the G9 II, Panasonic appears to have reduced the lowest step offered by the high gain path. Whereas on the GH6, the high gain shadow path was only used at ISO settings 3 stops above base, i.e. ISO 800 in standard color modes, ISO 2000 in Vlog mode. On the G9 II, Panasonic says it's available from base ISO upwards, suggesting the high gain step can be dropped further to make it available at these lower ISOs. However, it's worth noting that the GH6 base ISOs were 100 for standard color modes and 250 for Vlog, but for the G9 II, they are 100 and 500, respectively. The one-stop jump in base ISO in Vlog mode seems to suggest a high-gain path applying one-stop more gain than the low path in its base state, rather than the 3-stop difference required for DR boost on the GH6. But this doesn't explain how Panasonic can offer a mode that includes a high-gain component while maintaining the same ISO 100 rating for standard gamma. We have asked for clarification from Panasonic, but have not yet received a response. Though it's worth noting that when you exceed 60 frames per second, where the dual output mode can't operate, the minimum available ISO in log drops to 250, suggesting this is the true base state. We will do what we can to tease out what's going on when we get a chance to fully test the G9 too. Our main hope is that it helps the camera outperform the GH6, which failed to impress at low ISOs. More video than you'd expect. Unlike the G9, which launched missing a lot of video features, the G9 2 throws in everything but the kitchen sink right from day one. Panasonic swears this is a camera for still shooters, but the number of video resolutions and features accounted for, including Vlog and OpenGate 5.8K, sure make it feel almost as hybrid as the GH6 or S5 IBIS. It retains the full-size HDMI port of the S5 II series and can even record directly to a USB-C SSD. With its improved autofocus, why would anyone buy a GH6 over the G9 too? Rest assured that CFexpress card support, raw video output modes, and the built-in fan let the GH6 retain its hybrid crown for now. Panasonic says that G9 2 shooters should think of this camera more as a B-cam than a primary run-and-gun setup, and that the lack of a fan might become an issue when shooting high-res video in hot environments. Improved IBIS. The diminutive 4/3 type sensor is cushioned from jostles by an aggressive 8-stop separated in-body image stabilization system. Panasonic says that the IBIS system, where the sensor and lens stabilization systems work together, is only rated for 7.5 stops, and that they are reaching the physical limits of the lens-based optical stabilization systems at this point. There is a benefit though. The synchronization between the body and lens IBIS systems allows the camera to maintain 7.5 stops of correction at longer focal lengths where the in-body system alone could not. This system also enables the G9 2's 100MP handheld high-res mode. Although the higher resolution of this mode means it's a little slower to stitch its photos together, the more sophisticated algorithm Panasonic uses does a good job of reducing subject motion. Subject detection improvements. Panasonic's older depth from defocus AF system lagged behind the competition somewhat, but the G9 2 looks to address that. With the hybrid AF improvements, the G9 2 also brings some new subject detection and tracking algorithms. This time around, you'll find a number of categories in the AF menu that include one for animals, mainly pets, but also can track birds, one for cars, targeting motorsports photography, and another for motorcycles, which they say may work for bicycles, depending on the angle of the subject. Like the G9 2's improved human detection, the animal mode has eye detection as an additional option.